Well, today the government's finally put their Kyoto 2 target on the table. They've said, as expected, that it'll be consistent with a 5% cut by 2020. What that means is that on average between now and 2020, they'll keep their emissions around about 99.5% of 1990 levels. So it sounds like a small reduction. It's on track to a 5% cut by 2020. For us, obviously, a 5% target is clearly not enough for Australia, but what the government has said today as well is that they're prepared to increase their target within the second commitment period, and they're prepared to increase that up to 25%. And that's an important signal to the international community, and we welcome that.
And how significant is this with regard, was this expected from you?
Well, I mean, as most people will know, it's been a very tough couple of years in Australia on climate change policy. It's been a big political fight and a lot of controversy around that. So in some ways, it is a little bit surprising to see the government come out so strongly supporting Kyoto and reaffirming its commitment to a rules-based approach to tackling climate change, and that's really welcome. We were, it wouldn't have been at all surprising for the government to sort of go the other way, given what they've been through in the last 12 to 24 months. But nevertheless, they've come out and said they support Kyoto, they've put their number on the table, and they've affirmed that they're willing to go further on that target within the commitment period. So yeah, it's a positive sign from Australia, but they need to go home now and work out how they can increase their target, because 5% is not going to be enough.
And in terms of the cross-party consensus, I mean, your Prime Minister is now a YouTube sensation after her berating of the opposition leader Tony Abbott, which was sort of 15 memorable minutes for I think anyone who's watched it. But I guess that illustrated the deep divisions between those two parties. But how much of an agreement is there over climate change and policies needed to address it?
Well, there's bipartisan support for Kyoto, so that's an important move. Both sides of politics have got legacy on Kyoto. The Conservative side of politics refused to ratify. The Labor government did ratify, but both of them are now saying that they support Kyoto too, and they want Australia to stay part of it. They differ quite substantially on what to do about reducing emissions, and that difference is fairly entrenched now, and unfortunately I think it won't be resolved until after the next election. The crucial thing is that they are also saying they support the same target range, and we expect them to maintain that support in the lead up to the election. So there's bipartisan support for the targets, there's bipartisan support for Kyoto, there's just quite strong differences on how and what domestic policy should be put in place. Yeah.
And I guess the final point, Australia is a big coal producer. Are any of the emissions from the coal it produces included in its Kyoto commitments?
So all the emissions associated with the coal mining and production in Australia are covered by the Kyoto commitment, and they're not insignificant. In fact, the coal and gas mining will be one of Australia's most difficult tasks in Kyoto too. Is how does it deal with those emissions over the next 8 years? Because we're in the middle of a mining boom. Emissions from coal burnt for electricity overseas are obviously covered by other countries' policies. That's why it's crucial to get other countries actually doing things at home. China obviously is doing quite a lot already to reduce its emissions. We would all love it to do more, and that will have implications for the demand for coal from Australia. So although it's not covered by Kyoto, those emissions overseas aren't covered by Kyoto, it's still quite crucial to understand that getting countries inside these rules-based approaches for dealing with greenhouse gas emissions is the way forward, really.